Well, let's call the meeting to order and
It's 10:01.
could we call roll?
Okay. So roll call, Jason Tadlock,
Here?
Jessica Conley,
Here.
Sharon Johnson,
Here.
Guy Finley,
Here.
Corey Daly, here. I think the next two we don't actually have to do because this is not our, Guy was appointed at the last meeting with the interviews. And then for the chairman, do we not need to do that until the annual or until we close the TID and if we open a new one? So I think we might be able to skip those two agenda items.
Yeah, I believe we're fine moving forward with that then. Then as far as a review of the responsibilities of the joint
Excuse
review
me.
board.
Excuse me, you have already created your, appointed your citizen member. I don't know if you had an earlier meeting this year and automatically appointed the chair already, but typically every new TID, we have a new chair appointed just to make sure it's, there's no problem.
So when we created the TID, I was appointed as chair of the TID. We don't have a new TID yet. If a modification of the TID requires appointing a new chair, that's fine. We can do that when we, I guess, get to that item on the agenda. But I don't know if modification of the TID requires that or.
It does,
Okay.
because this is a new action. You're a new body as of today for consideration.
Okay, if they want to keep the same chair, can they reappoint or?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't mean it has to be a new person. It just needs to be, a chair needs to be appointed.
Well, which comes first in this process, the chicken or the egg, because the new TID hasn't been approved? Ward, I guess, like a legal opinion on that, or?
This would have benefited me to have an agenda here, but I would seem to me that you would want to have a chair before you go forward with any action in the meeting. So the initial act of this body should be to appoint a chair.
Okay.
I'll move to reappoint our chairperson of Jason Tadlock. Second.
You can say no.
No, that's fine. I'll accept.
Would you like me to do a roll call or?
Yes, when we do a roll call.
Okay, Jessica Conley,
Yes.
Sharon Johnson,
Yes.
Guy Finley,
Yes.
Corey Daly. Yes. Jason, do you vote for yourself?
Yes.
Great. All right, motion carried.
Okay. Are there any questions in regards to reviewing the responsibilities of the joint review board? I believe at the meeting today, we have a request to modify the current TID and say it's our responsibility to review that proposal and make a decision in regards to whether we approve that modification. Is there anything else that anyone would like to add?
I guess I'll just add that my understanding, and certainly Joe, you can chime in if you have a differing opinion. I guess my understanding is today is sort of a preliminary review to then make a, any proposed revisions, but that you guys will still have to, at the end of the process, vote to actually approve it once it's gone to the planning commission and the council. So you don't have to make a decision today as far as I'm aware. Joe, do you have any differing opinions?
No, that's exactly right. Today is your initial joint review board. The main thing is to appoint the chair. You already have the citizen member. This is a courtesy to walk through the project plan so that you are aware of what the city is proposing, because you will be pulled back for a final JRB meeting, assuming that the council approves the project plan at its meeting. I believe it's June 15th. So the last thing, the only other action today would be to try to schedule that final JRB meeting, and it just has to be after the council adopts it.
Okay, then let's go ahead and review and discuss the draft project plan. Adam, do you have?
So I think, go back to Joe.
Sure, absolutely.
All right, Joe, I think you were going to do an introductory walkthrough of what the changes are.
Yeah, I will talk through the project plan itself. I saw from what you just put on the screen, you can provide additional detail about the proposed development. And I see you all have hard copies of the project plan in front of you. I just want, if I could have you turn to page 8 for the map, just to reorient yourselves. This is TID 4. It's located down along 890 or 43 and 67. The TID was created back in 2017 as a mixed use TID. This has got a kind of a bow tie shape in that it goes on both the north and the south side of the interchange for I-43. I'm sure you're all familiar with the area. The development that's occurred out here is down on the south side of the interchange with the Love's Travel Plaza, the Holiday Inn Express on the south side, but nothing has really taken off on the north side. And that's really what this amendment is trying to help promote, is for that additional development. As I said, TID number 4 was created back on July 10th of 2017 as a mixed use TID. The district is in that northeast southwest corner of Highway 67 and 43. The district was originally created to promote commercial and industrial development, as I said, for the Love's Travel Stop and the Holiday Inn Express. The north was proposed and expected to be industrial development. Development in the district, however, slowed over the years, but the city has been approached by a new developer for property on the north side of the interchange, that being Creekside Community Development. They would like to develop 49 acres for multiple family residential and 21 acres of commercial along Highway 67 or South Lincoln Street. The proposed plan amendment and boundary amendment is to revise the plan to reflect the introduction of residential instead of the industrial that was originally proposed when created. It's also a boundary amendment to include 5 new additional parcels to add 8.7 acres to the district along Highway 67. The 5 additional parcels are the bus depot out there along Highway 67, just to orient everybody. The developer for the project for Creekside is Toronamine, and they're proposing the construction of 159 senior family units and 689 apartments for a total of 848 new residential units on that 49 acres. The original project plan in 2017 had the district reflecting an area of 140.78 acres, but that did not include roughly 98 acres of state-owned right-of-way and the Department of Motor Vehicles building, or even the city right-of-way. When the meets and bound description was sent to the state, it included all that for the acreage, but it didn't include it in the original project plan. I can tell you the real reason the additional 5 parcels are being included in this amendment is we thought the acreage was only the 140 that was created back in 2017. We have gotten confirmation from the DOR that we can count the right-of-way towards the development of the project. And that's primarily important for meeting the 35% test for the newly platted residential. As I said, the project plan amendment and boundary is to add additional property to those 5 parcels to the district. The city is limited to 4 boundary amendments through the life of the TID. This would be the first, so there would be 3 more remaining if there was something else to come back. And as I said, wanted to introduce the residential and make sure you, as the joint review board members, clearly understood that, since it was created to be commercial and industrial when originally established. The city, on page 4 of the project plan, the city anticipates making a total project expenditures for the TID as amended of approximately $20 million. That includes the estimated $3.1 million in debt service from the Series 2018A, where the city paid up front and financed to put in infrastructure on that south side. It includes $5.2 million in debt service for the Series 2018 B, that was also to help promote development on the south side that the city incurred debt to pay for. A new developer incentive for the project of $11.7 million for the Creekside project and roughly $81,000 in administrative cost. The project plan also anticipates, the original project plan anticipated that the total project costs were only going to be $17.4 million. So this is an increase of roughly $3 million more on project costs with the proposed amendment. The city projects that the land and improvements for the existing and the new Creekside development will total $145.4 million in incremental value. As of, that includes $13.2 million of existing increment from TID 4 as of 1/1/22. The additional Creekside development will add roughly $32.2 million. The original project plan back in 2017 only anticipated incremental value of roughly $46.5 million. So this is a much larger project and revenue generator being proposed. We went through the economic feasibility projections. We anticipate that the district will provide sufficient revenues that the district could close within 18 of its 20-year maximum life as a mixed-use district. We're projecting that the TID could close in 2036. I think you know from the annual reports that you've been receiving, TID number 4 has been slow, is in the hole as we speak. And this development is to jumpstart it so that the city can get out of the hole and the district can get out of the hole by 2036. The important findings for you today, as well as the council and everybody in reviewing the project, are in the summary of findings starting on the bottom of page 4. The first and foremost test for you as the Joint Review Board is to consider the but-for test. And that's but for the creation of this TID. Would this development happen, or would it not happen in a manner and at a time or at a quality that the city would desire? So that's but for creating the TID, this development would not occur the way the city would like it to happen. The city has been approached by the developer who has represented that the cost for residential development in the city, and I'm seeing this across the state just as a bit of information, they're not able to get enough return on residential development without having additional public assistance. Number 2, that the economic benefits of the district as measured by increased employment, business and personal income and property values are sufficient to compensate the cost of the improvements. I'll talk about the cash flow in more detail if you'd like, but a secondary benefit that is anticipated from this development and the creation of, or the amendment of this TID, is that not only would the developer be buying supplies, et cetera, during construction, but the addition of that many additional units will provide new clients, customers for all the businesses, not only within the district, but within the city as a whole. Number 3, in that you represent the overlying taxing districts. This is probably the most important to you, that the benefits of the proposal outweigh the anticipated tax increments to be paid to the owners of property in the overlying taxing districts. This goes back to the but-for test. But for the creation of this TID, you would not be seeing this additional increase in revenue or development moving forward. So that number 3 ties back to number 1 in the but-for your consideration. Number 4, not less than 50% of the area in the district is suitable for mixed-use development. We are projecting it right now to be 68.07%, so it meets the 50% test for mixed use. And also that the residential component is less than 35, newly platted residential is less than 35% of the district, and we're projecting that at being just over 22%. It's also important to keep in mind that in order to do newly platted residential, the residential units must have a density of at least 3 units per acre. And this obviously will meet that requirement with the 400 and roughly 850 units that are being proposed. Based on the meeting, those percentages, number 5, number 4, the district does qualify for being designated as a mixed-use district. The project costs included in the plan are also there to promote the development of mixed use within the district. So it is, the plan is promoting what it is expected and is supposed to do. Improvements in the district are also likely to enhance the value of substantially all the other property within the district. It's sitting vacant at this time, so if it's developed, it should improve values all the way around. Number 8, the city cannot have more than 12% of its equalized value contained within a TID district or within all of its TID districts. I can go through the math that shows it, but the city is well beneath the 12% test. Number 9, the plan is feasible and will be in conformity with the city's master plan for being amended for the residential. The city also estimates that roughly 35% of the area within the district will be for retail at the end of the district's life. And number 11, we do not have to worry about having any recently annexed in parcels, because if the city did annex any of the land within the district or in the boundary amendment, it would have to be paying the township it was annexed in from their lost tax revenue for the next 5 years. I think if I could have you turn to page 12, and I'll be happy to answer any questions as we go through. Page 12, here's the 12% test calculation. You'll see that we are projecting that the incremental value of the existing TIDs plus the base being added by this amendment will have roughly $14.4 million in TIF included in the city. The maximum 12% says it could be 126 million. So the city still has 120 or $113 million or $112 million of capacity if there is a new TID district that wanted to come online now or in the future. Section 6 on the next page, this includes a listing of all the eligible TID expenses. The one I'd like to highlight is on page 18. This is the developer grants and incentives. The city anticipates that it'll provide Creekside Development 50% of the annual incremental revenue that it generates from the project. It's projected that that'll generate $11.7 million. The proposal and the discussion and the plan is that this would be provided back to the developer through a municipal revenue obligation. That is a fancy instrument for doing a pay-as-you-go incentive back to the developer. What that means is that every year the city would be providing back half of the incremental revenue to the developer. If the project does not come in generating the revenues as high as expected or slower than projected, then the payments back to the developer would come in less. They would be less than the $11.7 million. I know in the letter from the county, Jessica, you got a comment about wanting to make sure that there was a maximum amount of money being paid to the developer. That's kind of two-folded question. The first part is if the MRO says it's going to be $11.7 million, that's the maximum number. That doesn't float up and down. Secondly, the MRO is based purely on the revenue projected to be generated from the development. It doesn't tie back to costs. So if it costs the developer more money to build what they're saying it's going to build, it doesn't impact the calculations at all back for the incentive back to them. So that's, I think, important to note. So just just wanted to let you know that the MRO is not an open-ended instrument that they could get more money. Flipping to page 22, here you'll see the projected project costs. Here's where you see phase 1 in 2018. That was, thank you. If you go the phase 1, those were the improvements done in 2018. Those were based on the bond amounts. I do not have actual breakdowns to respond to the county's question about how that money was actually spent and how it came in. I just have it reflecting what the bond amounts were for those projects that were done back in 2018. Phase 2 in 2023, these are all related to the Creekside development. There's that $11.7 million for the MRO back as the developer incentive. If you could go to page 24, Adam, please. Here are the development assumptions. You can see that, right, the actual column in gray, that is the $13.1 million that has been generated by what has gone on the south side from 2017 to date in incremental revenue. Area A, the column next to it, that is the $132 million for Creekside. And if you go look at the bottom, you'll see the development assumption as to how that is expected to be put in. The expectation is that they would start construction this year, get about $4.2 million into the ground, and then a little bit more in 2024, and then begin in real earnest for construction in 2025 out through 2030. If you go to the next page, please. Here are the increment projections. This is based on the city's current 2022 tax rate. We do not have an appreciation factor included for the value to the property nor to the tax rate. I'm seeing across the state, values are going up, but tax rates are going down. So we keep that at 0 to try to be more conservative in our projections. But we're estimating that with the addition of the new Creekside development, TID number 4 will generate roughly $27.6 million in total revenue over its life, going out through 2036. And then I think if you could go to page 28 on the cash flow, please. Here's where you see columns on the left are the projected revenues. We have that based on that's the existing revenue plus adding in the Creekside development. Based on the incremental revenue and 50%, the 2.315, that was the 2018 A bonds. The 3.605 was the 2018 B bonds that have already been done and obligated for the south side development. The next is the MRO for the $11.7 million back to Creekside. It had no interest rate. And again, that's based on 50% of their annual incremental revenue being generated by their property only, not the district as a whole. The next column is the admin expense projected at $81,000 a year. And you'll see that by the time 2036 rolls around, we anticipate that the district will have a cumulative balance of roughly 6.1 million and 3.5 million outstanding. So the district could close. If you go up some of the columns, you'll see that TID number 4 is in the hole and is expected to continue to be in the hole and not start digging itself out until 2028. It will continue. The city right now, instead of putting the payment on those 2018 bonds that were done for the district, they have been borrowing money from other funds so that it's not being a burden on the taxpayers as a whole. But you can see that the district is lagging behind, and if the new Creekside development or some other large development were not to occur, this district would never get out of the hole. Lastly, if you could go to page 36, this is the table that shows the amount of money that each jurisdiction, overlying jurisdiction, would be contributing to TID number 4. This is for the life of the district. Moving forward, you'll see that the county's share would be roughly $4.3 million. The city is the second largest contributor at 10.7. The The school district would be contributing 11.5. The technical college, $955,000. So that is the amount of incremental revenue that the overlying taxing jurisdictions are providing in support of this TID. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or maybe turn it back to you, Adam, if you want to do an overview of what the Creekside project is going to look like.
I just had a couple comments first, just as additional information as Joe talked about. I mean, the TID is losing money. We actually the council on Monday had to approve another loan from the electric fund to the TID of $170,000. So, it is a real cost right now in terms of the TID that, that's one of the things that we're hoping this project would benefit not only the city, but the TID as a whole. So that's something just to keep in mind. I just wanted to clarify too, that, 50% of the increment that we propose or is proposed to be available in increment for Autonomy hasn't been approved, by the council yet. This is just a preliminary number. So, I just want to keep that in mind that we don't know what that number is going to be, but I think that's probably a reasonable starting point based upon, preliminary conversations we've had. So the city attorney Ward has reviewed the proposed project plan and provided a letter saying he thinks it meets the statutory requirements. I did forward that email or that letter to you guys yesterday, so hopefully you saw it. He did provide a more detailed analysis, which I didn't distribute yet because I wanted to make sure he was okay with it. But so he has gone into more detail than just the brief letter he sent or gave us yesterday. So I can share that after this meeting. But I know the county does have some concerns or questions that I know they were trying to get information on. One, Joe, just to clarify, so you're saying you think the way the project plan is written now that it is capped at the 11.7 million number in terms of the limit? Oh,
I'm sorry, I put myself on mute. Based on the assumptions, the project plan does not limit the city to negotiate a different amount up or down from the 50%. If the county wants to put a cap on it and the rest of the JRB is supportive of it, that is possible and can be done. But we are basing it on 50% of what they've told us they expect to build and what we project the increment to be provided. So if the county wants to put a harder cap on it, and the rest of the JRB agrees and the council agrees, that can be done.
and just, I guess, real quick too, just as before, kind of turn it back over to the board to talk in more detail, and I guess the county to get some more information on their questions. Just Matt, if you could pull up the layout of the project, revised site plan. So this is just the revised site plan that Autonomy has given us in terms of what they envision for this development. And it's similar to the site plan that's been approved by the planning commission, although they are going to have to go back and get it approved, this revised version approved, because they've reduced the number of buildings from 17 to 11. And that's significant because I think that's going to increase the speed with which they're going to be able to, put up the buildings and have that increment generated, which is relevant for the conversation earlier when Joe's talking about when he thinks the value is going to be added and when the TID's going to start generating money, or I should say when the project's going to start generating money for the TID. So I don't know.
Same number of units, just larger buildings, or
Correct.
same number
Yeah.
of units, just less buildings.
Yeah, they'd have 11 buildings, 72 units, as opposed to I think it was like 16 or 17 buildings at 53 units. So, and I just was going to ask Autonomy, just because we're talking about trying to, in terms of verifying what Joe said about timeline and when the increment would be created. When do you guys envision, start under this revised proposal? When would you envision, getting those buildings started under construction?
Well, we'd like to start moving dirt this fall, early winter, and then probably start foundations next spring.
So you'd envision starting the actual buildings next spring then,
Yeah.
in terms of actual vertical
Right.
work? Okay.
Those pickleball courts up on the top, is that? As you're putting in senior, yeah.
And how many buildings do you anticipate building, let's say in 24?
I mean, we're looking at doing at least one a year, possibly two a year, so. I mean, they're gonna be consecutive. As we do one foundation, we'll start on the next foundation. And as one's getting framed up, the next one's getting framed up, so.
And so the phasing would be the front two buildings and the clubhouse, all that infrastructure is there for
Right.
the additional buildings as it gets built out.
So that would be the first phase in the front,
Right. Including the commercial.
in the clubhouse and the commercial. Okay.
Mhm.
And how long do you think that would take?
Couple of years, 2 years for the first phase, yeah.
And we'll have to just double check with Joe after this meeting whether he thinks that changes, his estimated timeline of when the increment would be created, so.
It all depends on how the meetings go with the city and, weather dependent too on the winter. We built through the winter, so.
For the purpose of the project plan, we've used the best estimates and expectations we have now. If it changes, that doesn't impact the plan, doesn't stop the project plan from moving forward. As you said, it would just impact if things go slower or go faster, that'll impact the ultimate cash flow, but it doesn't impact the creation of the approval of the TID amendment.
It gets completed sooner than the cash flow comes earlier, and we would have the potential to close the TIDs, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that, if the perception is that you're gonna have under that prior chart about, like $4 million, added this year, and then I don't remember what the number was for next year, that just want everybody to be understanding that those numbers may vary based upon this revised plan of having fewer buildings and so.
May I ask a question to Teronomy? Is this genuinely a phased project, or do you anticipate one phase with continuous construction throughout?
I would say the second, but we are phasing it. We'll mass grade the whole site. We'll look to get the infrastructure on the whole site. And then we're looking at doing it in phases. So we do have a phasing plan.
Do you anticipate continuing construction in the manner that you've described, or if the first building doesn't sell out, you won't begin to build the second one until you have sellout?
We're going to start off doing how I described it, consecutively buildings, and we think the demand's there for the market and the apartments. So we're not going to wait until we fill a building and then do another one. We're going to continue to build.
What, if you don't mind me asking, what's projected rents or square footage on the apartments?
The minimum one bedrooms are 750 square feet.
Mhm.
And they go up to 3 bedrooms with lofts that are, I don't know, square footage on those, but the rents are we're looking at 1,100 to 2,400 for rents.
When we look at, I want to make sure I understand the estimated construction cost. Correctly, this is all the estimates that would be a part of the TID and paid for or covered as part of that TID. And I don't want to nitpick or nickel and dime them. I just wish I had invested in land in Elkhorn before. I would assume that's a negotiated price that's already there. That's pretty solid, or is that still in negotiations on the 80,000 per acre?
That's a set price.
The land,
Yeah.
this is your purchase price.
Right.
Okay. I would just like to note for all Elkhorn community members that criticize us when we purchased the land at 20,000 an acre, that was just a few years ago. We did well with that. Yeah, so I mean, I know it is what it is. You have to pay whatever the individual's wanting for the land. So I get that. That just seemed a little higher than what that market was. But at the end of the day, and then the 40% contingency, is that pretty typical for projects like that? I know that will only get billed if it's there. I mean, I like having a healthy contingency, but the 40% seems.
To clarify that, that there's a contingency in the construction costs, but that also includes legal engineering as well. So it's not just a contingency on the construction.
Right.
It's to include the site design, the plan, the developer's agreement, those types of things as well.
So those aren't already built in?
Correct. No, that's
Not at
pure,
all?
the numbers
Okay.
up above are pure construction costs.
All right.
If I could just go back and highlight, the construction costs do not impact the MRO payments. As I said, the proposal would be to pay Tronomy 50% of the incremental value that they generate. If it costs them $40 million to build it, so be it. It would still be based on the value. If they can come in and build it cheaper, that's to their benefit as well. So, but the MRO is not tied to construction estimates.
I know from the school district perspective, I've been on the Economic Development Alliance and associated with the city for over a decade now. And we've been year after year after year pointing out the shortage on housing within the school district. And I know there's been housing studies done within the county, and Elkhorn area was shown to be by far the most substantially behind in housing units and the need for housing there. We're already over 700 open enrolled students. We have another 140 coming to us next year, and about 60 to 70% of those families have indicated they want to live in Elkhorn, but there just isn't the housing there. So I view this, I think that the gentleman from Ellers, I'm sorry, I can't read your name. It's a little short. That I believe it meets the statement, the threshold test. I don't, and having worked in this and hoping to have these other developments come in. I know there was an apartment, development that was laid out up by where I live on Market Street, and, they weren't able to put shovel in the ground. I know the numbers aren't there. I feel strongly that that would just be sitting empty land if not for the TID or the supports in this type infrastructure. And so I view it as the long game for the school district and local tax base, and that by, supporting the TID and allowing that creation, that at the end of the day, it will, or not the end of the day, but when the development's done and that TID's paid back, it'll be a huge benefit to the community and that property value that will eventually come on the books and lower all the, help lower the mill rates and the other pieces when that TID does close. So from my perspective, it's not generating, how much is it generating right now from tax revenue?
Not much.
Yeah, as farmland. So to me, it's a no-brainer in a long-term investment in creating greater value in the community and property tax revenue for the school district. But I think it's interesting, that chart, where it says 11.5 for the school district. Really, that's the local tax base and what it would help lower the local levy. But if it's not built, it wouldn't lower the local levy anyway. So, but it gives a good idea when the TID does close, that's gonna, that's probably about our local levy. That's about 5% of the total local levy that would be generated from just that one property piece. So that would be a reduction in everyone's local levy portion by about 5%.
Jason, I know you weren't involved in the early presentation that we did for the city on Tronomy's product, but I don't need to sell you on something you already support, but I do want to comment to the product that Tronomy delivers from these 1 bedrooms all the way up to the 3 bedrooms and lofts. Is it does give a broad spectrum to the population. It's not a new thing to them. They've done it in many communities. It's very successful. And the great thing is that 1 bedroom serves the professional community of a single person or a single couple, and then the 3 bedrooms with the loft is very much geared towards a family situation, plus all of the amenities that they provide and the green space that this development is going to give is intended to provide the housing for families, for the entire community as well. So it's a nice development for that.
And we checked with East Troy to kind of get a feel for the ratio of students per units. And it's something that we definitely have room in our elementary schools. Our local resident population has been going down. So Jackson and Westside are both down 100 students in each building from where they were just 6 years ago. The location of this, when fully developed, would be easily, it would be in Jackson's boundaries, but across the street is Westside. So we easily could divide, if need be, within the apartment complex to Westside and Jackson, and both of those schools have room.
Great.
If it was out in the Tibbetts boundary, I would be concerned because that school's full now, but just 5 years ago, they were our school with the most capacity. So it ebbs and it's been ebbs, had ebbs and flows, but we feel we have the room and the capacity and wouldn't need to add to our schools at all.
And just Jason, I was just looking it up, and the property is currently valued at $47,000. And they're paying $800 a year in taxes. So across all the taxing jurisdictions. So the county gets $138, the city gets $303. So that sort of gives you an
Sounds like
indication.
that property should be reassessed.
I think so. I know. I had the same thought.
We seem to
get
the
mine all
the time.
So anyway.
Just to echo Jason's comments and taking on this new role, I did my own kind of anecdotal asking around, and without a doubt, every bit of feedback I got was that there is just not housing in this community right now, affordable or otherwise. It really doesn't matter what point you're at. And it's to the point where the rents are going up because all of those property owners know they have everybody over a barrel. If there is no space to be had, they can charge what they want. And people are taking that or going to a different community. So to just echo the no-brainer comment, this project is in a hole right now and not going in the right direction. This seems to be a risk-free way to do that because obviously using a pay-as-you-go scheme means that unlike the initial round of this project, the city or not anybody else, not any of the taxing bodies are putting their necks out on the line if the project doesn't pan out as anticipated. So I think this has been crafted in a good way that really generates a win across the board for all the taxing bodies as well as the developer in the city. So it looks like a great idea, and I look forward to seeing what the city comes up with in their round in discussion with the developer and for us to review to do a final approval on.
Jason, can I ask a few questions?
Yeah.
Since Geronimo is there, is that correct? My understanding is you're there.
Yes.
Can I just ask since one of the most important things as the Joint Review Board, we are supposed to make this decision on the but-for test. Can you provide maybe why this is imperative to you, why the TID needs to be part of this, that you wouldn't be able to build otherwise? In other words, explain how this is meeting the but-for test for you.
Yeah, this is Ryan Cardinal. I don't know which way the camera is. I'm Geronimo's engineer. There's several pieces to this development. One of the primary ones that hits this but-for issue for the developer is access. So with this many residents within a space, obviously we've been through with the city. There's both life safety and just general ease of getting in and out of this property. The only place that we have accessible to us is along 67, essentially across from the Cunis RV Center. A single access point is detrimental to a development of this size. The only other location we really have for that life safety is crossing the railroad tracks to the northeast. And that is, I don't think I need to say much, how difficult getting an access is, let alone the design cost, the coordination with the railroad, and then the construction cost really puts it over the top to be able to get that secondary access point. This is a significant amount of infrastructure, and then also this site is relatively low and high groundwater. I believe there has been numerous other developers that have approached this property, and they've all left because of how low it is, the poor soils, and the high groundwater. Autonomy has developed a plan to mitigate that, but it does significantly impact the construction cost to develop this particular parcel because of those issues with it, with the site.
It's wetlands. So.
Yeah, there's wetlands on the property. We're getting those reevaluated, but again, because of the low nature and the high groundwater, we're having to, if you see the site plan, we're having to kind of jog buildings around these wetlands, which again is we gladly do to protect the environment and not impact those wetlands, but there's a significant cost to develop this particular piece of property to not impact those wetlands. With the crossings that we're going to have to put in, the way we have to jockey the buildings around to make the wetlands a site feature. If we were just saying construction costs alone, we'd put these things in a grid, and it wouldn't work for this particular property. But again, that lengthens all of the infrastructure costs. It lengthens sewer and water, and just the general mass grading that it takes to make this happen again. So those are the primary issues with this particular site that the developer is going to need assistance with.
Thank you. That helps tremendously. I appreciate you being there and being able to explain that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and to echo that, I mean, we did have a very large industrial
Shona Containers.
Shona Containers that did they actually even purchase the land, or
No.
were close to it? And yeah, it was the poor soils and for the size of their building and so forth. And they ended up purchasing land just a few miles down the road in Delavan and built down there instead. At the end of the day, I'm actually much more excited about this modification to the TID than it just being industrial, because I feel it fits a much higher need for the community and will eventually generate a lot more tax revenue than had Shona Containers just built that building there.
Just a perspective, I guess, from the Walworth County side of things. The Finance Committee had originally given me a directive when I first began to hear about these changes coming our way, which was that they were opposed to this simply because it sounded as though there would not be a workforce affordable type housing involved in this. Our last meeting here in May, or in April, I should say, I was able to discuss this a little further with them now that we have the project plan in front of us. And they've all agreed that Walworth County wants to get involved in the subject of housing. We will be bringing this to our county board meeting, I believe in June or July. I don't know that we've chosen which month it's coming yet. But the subject of housing in general across the county is going to be discussed, and they would like to somehow bring this to the forefront of discussion across the county. I don't know where any of that leads because it's just kind of first being brought forward. But in these early discussions here with the Finance Committee, they've taken a slightly step backwards in that first statement to me, and they've said that it does appear in my discussions also, I should say, I've also discussed this with Derek Dioria at Waseda, and he was very supportive of this and in bringing that to the Finance Committee at the county, and just kind of some general conversation we had there. they agree that housing in general is an issue, and so they would like to be able to support this. I think they feel a little unsure because we haven't tackled the subject at all yet, but I do think that they're supportive in general of housing and what this could bring for us. So it sounds like I have their support. However, there is one thing that is a really big deal to the county, and that's where I would ask for maybe the Joint Review Board and your support of this so that I can help be supportive of this as well. And that is putting some sort of limit. That $11.5 million number, we need there to be a limit stated within that project plan that this project would not exceed that. You know, none of us have the ability to be at the table when that final MRO agreement is being configured and finalized. And so really our only opportunity to ensure that this doesn't become something different than what we are being told right now here, at least not substantially different, is if there'd be a statement placed in that project plan that says this would be capped at the 50%, 11.7, whatever that number is. And if that statement was put in the project plan, then the finance committee is authorizing me to be supportive of this.
Jessica, this is Joe Murray from Ellers.
Mhm.
Could we, I know that the city is busy in negotiations as we speak, and I understand your concern. Could we put language in the plan noting that it's intended, as it's written now, talking about how it's 50% in the increment? But as Adam mentioned, the timing may change. And if the development comes in faster, or Toronto changes it, says, no, we're going to build $10 million in 2025, that would mean the dollar amount of the MRO would go up. Could we, instead of capping it at, say, the 11.7, could we pick a different number? I'll throw out 12.5. Just to say what it is, just so that it's not hamstringing the city in terms of its negotiations on the development agreement, nor hamstringing Geronimi as far as if they want to accelerate the building.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. To me, it's really about having a limit in there. And I think that's reasonable to give a little bit of room here to figure out exactly how things roll out. I'd be comfortable with that.
I throw that out as a possible solution. It's obviously up to the city and the JRB members. I just, I guess, Adam, I'd like to know if you had any reaction, or if the other JRB members had any reaction to putting another sentence in there to say maximum MRO of 12.5 million.
I think if we were to put that language in there and that satisfies the county at this point, it also doesn't preclude us if something comes up that's unforeseen and we need to revisit that we would still have up to what, 2 more modifications that could be revisited, and that number could be revisited if need be down the road.
Absolutely.
I agree with adding that modification to the language.
The other 2 small questions that I have, I guess, to me are less of importance, but I think worthy of discussing. I'm not sure why we pulled out the actual project titles that were in there from the original project plan and instead put the bonds in there. And I say that because this project plan is really the only thing we have to look at for the next 20 years as we review this every year. And so for me, it's important to kind of have that review of what is this about? And by us saying that the project is nothing more than bond names, it's hard for me to really understand what was our original expenditures. And if we could put those back from the original plan to be able to say, you know, as I look at the project plan, the original one, we had project titles of land acquisition, infrastructure, traffic controls, turning lanes, engineering, stormwater improvements, rail spur, wetland crossing. I don't know how many of those we actually ended up doing with that bonding, but if we could return those actual project expenditures, because that's what we actually authorized, not, the bonding is a form of revenue and what we funded it with. It's not what we actually spent it on.
I do not, Joe from Ellers again, I do not have that breakdown for what the bonds were actually, how it was actually spent out. The bonds obviously estimated and projected those types of costs. I do not have that detail. I don't know if that kind of level of detail has been provided to the JRB with your annual meetings or not. I don't know if the city can provide me that easily. I'll have to turn that back to Adam and Corey to see if you've got that kind of a breakdown. If you can and can provide it to me, I can update the plan, but I do not have that information at this point.
And I think it's important because as you get to your 30% audit, your 100% audit, you're going to have to go back and say how you spent this. So at some point, you're going to need to be able to break it out by that anyways. And so it just, to me, it just makes it all much more transparent to be able to say how we spent this money.
For what it's worth, I agree with Ms. Conley on that 100%.
We do have some information about what some of the original bonding was for in terms of, road and other utilities. So we could look forward and try to.
I mean, you would have all the expenses that you spent.
I mean, it was
We just need
reported
to
each year,
compile it.
yeah.
I think that'd make it really nice. I like having, this gives us a really good layout of here's all the projected cost. We should be able to just pull that back for all those prior expenses from that have already been spent. I think, and that was a discussion that we had with your predecessor, Adam, I think, because originally it was included and then I think he went away from the detail because technically it wasn't required, but I think it makes sense just to have it for the group.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense to have that, particularly when we're looking at part of the impetus for this is the TID being in the hole. It's good for the JRB to understand how that hole was created and where the expenses came from that created it. So I would agree that that would be a good thing to have and worth our time.
The third thing that I wanted to just bring up here is there was some language that had been in the original project plan that discussed right after the project expenditures were all listed. It was right after the financing costs section, which I believe is in section 8. No, section 7 now. No, not it. 6, move to 6. There was some wording in there about how if any revenues came in, there were about 3 different paragraphs right at the end. And I'm just kind of curious why that whole section was taken out. I think it's important to be able to say that if there's any revenues being generated by the TID, that those revenues would be applied towards the TID.
What page is that? This is on page, well, do you have
19, but it's gone.
Right, on page 19, it's gone.
It would be on 19, but it's gone.
It's on page 14 of the original project plan.
which I can actually email you, Matt.
Oh, yeah, I see what she's talking about.
I just emailed it to you.
Yeah, there's like 2 or 3 paragraphs that were eliminated, and it seems like those would be important to continue to keep in there.
I'm looking at page 14 of the original project plan, and I'm not seeing I'm just scanning it here quickly. I'm not seeing that referencing to other revenue sources.
In the very last paragraph, it says project costs will be diminished by any income, special assessments, or other revenues, including user fees or charges. And then it goes on from there.
Yeah, it's right here. I'll share this.
It also references some of those other, the statutes and stuff. So it just seemed like maybe all of those paragraphs could be put back.
It's a given. I have no problem putting it back in, but that is a given by statute. So if the city were to collect special assessments for putting in the roads associated with the TID, that would be TID revenue. So it wasn't taken out intentionally, I can tell you that. I think it was just assumed that that's what it is by statute, but if you'd like to add in additional language, we can do that.
And Joe, I think it makes sense to just put it back in there, even if it's statutorily required, it's a good reminder for everybody, so.
That's fine.
Were there any other changes that were made? I know we got this new draft, and without going word for word, was there anything of them that we should be told about?
No, as I sent out the question that came in, I believe the only thing that changed was on page 3 to clarify the language about why the additional acreage went up. I think that's the only sentence that I changed. That was from the version I sent out to you. I sent it over to the city. Adam reviewed it, and he and I had a conversation and asked me to clarify it a little bit, and that's what I did. I think that's the only change in the version from the first one that you got to the one that you're looking at today.
Okay.
Well, I do have a question related to the Jones Busing Depot and that location, including it into the TID in that component. Do we know what the current, because I would assume that, let's say he decides not to sell that land or doesn't, it's going to be in the TID, so the tax revenue that's generated from those properties would go to pay back or would be collected and be a part of the TID while that TID's in existence, whether he sells it or not, correct?
So
So,
only if new increment was created on it.
well, that's part of the proposal, correct? Or am I not understanding that?
Yeah, I'm saying if you were to sell it or somebody wants to redevelop it, then yeah, the new increment created would go into the TID, but until that happens.
Oh, so those plots aren't going into the TID right under this proposal?
No, they are. I'm just saying that any revenues that are, additional increment that's created would go into the TID, but I'm saying existing tax revenues aren't going to go to help pay for the TID.
Oh, they're not. They would stay on the books as
Yes.
normal until that property was acquired and redeveloped or something.
Yeah, the value has to go up for it to actually benefit the TID. So.
Okay, all right. Then that was my only question related to that.
And whether, and I know certainly the county raised the question, and when I talked to Jessica about, whether it makes sense to include those 5 properties in there, because, well, if they do develop, is it absolutely necessary? Do we want the additional revenues to go into the TID, or does do the county and the taxing jurisdictions just want to enjoy the entire benefit of it? And that's up for you guys to decide. I mean, this originally started months ago in terms of expanding the boundaries because we were trying to figure out how to stay under that 35% threshold and working with Toronto and looking at options. Plus, just from a sort of, I don't say aesthetic perspective, but it looked odd that you had sort of looked like somebody took a bite out of the upper corner of the TID district, just the way it was laid out. So plus, like I said, Eric Jones had indicated that he was interested in selling, and so we thought it was foreseeable that someone might want to do a project, and or quite frankly, Toronto had expressed interest in maybe buying it for a variety of reasons. So we just thought, well, it made sense for that reason to include it.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, it's up to you guys whether you want to do it or not, but that was the reason we proposed to do it.
From our perspective, we're fine with it. I could see, from an aesthetic standpoint or site plan piece, But it was Tronomy. I don't know. I wouldn't want that out in the front of the development.
Our nice apartment with the lovely view of the bus barn, yeah.
Yeah, and the bus barn, you know, they start the buses up early in the morning, they're there. There's a number of factors there. And we spoke with Eric as it potentially could impact the school district from the stance of, well, if there's not a bus depot, does that mean we need to assume the responsibility of bus or whatever? But he's committed to, if he were to sell that side, that you know, at least from his perspective, right, that he would create another location elsewhere and lease that out to whoever's doing the busing, so. So if that were to sell or to go through at some point to do that. So we're comfortable from the school district perspective. It's just unique that that's also, we don't own it, but our contractors lease it and use it, so. Okay, so I'm fine with that. I just have that. Are there any other questions related to the draft of the project plan?
Do we need to
Just,
take some kind of a formal motion to be able to put these 3 changes in?
It sounds like we have to wait until the city approves the plan and then schedule another meeting for us to
Well, if you
approve.
guys-
Is that correct, or?
I mean, it seems like it'd be fine for you guys to vote to make, to make recommendation, you could vote to make a recommendation to make these changes, and then we can certainly, incorporate them before we present that to the planning commission, hopefully tomorrow. If not, if we don't have time to do it by tomorrow, we certainly can tell the planning commission that that's been the recommendation and we can work on incorporating them. If Jessica, you'd like to have a formal record of the recommendations.
I would.
Yeah, all I was saying earlier was that at the end of the day, you don't have to, today you're not making a decision on whether to approve the project plan amendment as a whole, so.
Right, I guess my concern from an agenda standpoint, we don't have listed any formal motion or action to be taken.
But we can make a recommendation that something be included.
I don't see any reason from open records or meetings or other issues from here that they couldn't make that recommendation with a motion.
So I would move then to include the 3 items we discussed, which is to have a limit placed upon the MRO as to a dollar amount limit, and then also return the language regarding the last 3 paragraphs under financing costs in section 6. And then,
The original project costs.
thank you, the original project costs be returned to that phase 1 of the project list.
I'll second.
So, point of order, I think that if we're gonna say there's gonna be a cap, we need to say what it is. We're saying that there should be a cap, but do we need to determine that right now, or are we leaving that to be negotiated by the city? Because Jessica, this is where the county's thing, so.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but before you pursue that, it would seem to me that you were discussing sort of a sliding cap, Joe, as I understood it. So if there was an increase in the velocity of the development, then the cap would be adjusted accordingly to keep that margin across the board. Is that something mathematically that can be figured out, or do you need to put a hard number on there, like the 12 figure that you mentioned?
I think the county's desire is to have a hard figure. And I'm not recommending the $11.7 million cap that's in the MRO right now, because as you're aware, Tronomy is talking about maybe changing schedule. Timing could come down. You're still in the negotiations of the developer agreement. I threw out a figure putting a cap at $12.5 million on it, just to put a hard number on it to satisfy the county. That would then, when you're negotiating the development agreement and the MRO comes finally up, you can't go higher than 12.5 million, or you can always come back to the JRB and say, we want to change it to 13 million, whatever the number might be. So I would not
I can
recommend
include that.
Yeah, I would just, I mean, if we say an MRO not to exceed 12.5 million, and I just throw that number out, anybody can throw out another number. If it comes back higher through the negotiations, then we'd have to go back to the JRB and have the county, have the JRB say, okay, the developer says he's really going to generate enough to support 14 million. And the county will say, fine, we'll change the MRO if we're now closer to development, we know more about it, and the developer says he can gonna generate it faster at 14, we're okay with it. So, and we have done that in other Walworth County communities. So this is not the first for Elkhorn.
I could put that into my motion that the $12.5 million number be used as the limit.
I just want to discuss going back to it. I don't feel it's appropriate in accordance with open meetings where we haven't indicated that we're going to take a formal action to have a motion and a vote on that. I think giving them the direction that we need these pieces incorporated into the plan, which I completely agree with everything that you've shared, Jessica, and them bringing that back to the JRB at that next meeting for a formal approval, I think is appropriate. Maybe I misheard you, Ward, but I don't know. And I would never do a formal motion or an action on an agenda that didn't list that as a possible action.
I agree with you 100%, Jason, but what I was understanding the motion to be was a recommendation to council.
Yeah, we're effectively directing them to take it back.
Right.
And discuss.
Do we need a formal motion on that? Okay, that's, I guess it doesn't.
Honestly, I don't know that it's a distinction without a difference. I don't think it makes a difference whether you have a formal motion on it, but you're certainly not violating open meetings or open meeting laws by having a motion that's the will of the body to make that recommendation. I don't think that creates a problem.
That's fine. Then I think, is there anything else that we want added to that motion in regards to what needs to be in that plan for a final approval? Okay, then I think let's do a roll call vote since we have people online.
Jessica Conley?
Yes.
Well, no one, do we need a second? I'm sorry.
Oh, she
had
did,
a second.
Sharon
Okay,
seconded.
thank you. So Jessica is yes. Sharon?
Yes.
Guy?
Yes.
Corey?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
Okay, motion carried.
All right, we need to set the meeting date to consider approval of the TID. So what did we need for a time frame to get all of that work done? Or the approval from the city?
Plan is for this to go to the council for adoption or approval on June 5th. You can schedule it anytime after that. Typically, we wait for the council approval, then send the notice to the paper and usually have it roughly 10 days after the council adoption, but you can set it as early as June 6th if you'd like.
If to give the 10 days in that time, I mean, I don't want to slow down the project or anything like that, but if the council's approving June 5th, you're saying that typical would be 10 days after that?
Yes, typically after we get the council approval, then we send the notice to the paper and schedule the final JRB. You do have to have a public notice for 7 days. Well, we could send out the notice before the council approval, but if you wanted to wait till after the council approval and then 7 days, that would mean you'd be looking at a meeting right around, let's say, the week of the 19th of June.
Yeah, I mean, I tentatively just planned for June 15th, but that was just based off of looking at the timeline that Ellers had given us earlier this year and assuming the council does approve it on June 5th. So that needs to be 10 days after the June 5th meeting.
So with the noticing in the paper,
I'm sorry, June 20th. Sorry about that. Yeah, I meant to say June 20th would be the proposed proposed date, and that would give us basically 2 weeks from the council meeting on the June 5th.
Would June 20th work for everybody? What time? Should we say the same time, 10 o'clock?
Okay, can we go back to how long it has to be noticed? Was it 7 or 10 days prior?
7.
I said 10.
10?
Is that 10 calendar or 10 business?
It's 7 days, 7 days notice, but typically we need to get it to the paper a few days ahead of time to get it into the paper. So-
The independence yours, so I don't know,
Yeah,
will they be
well-
able to get it if you put it in Tuesday morning right
No,
away?
they absolutely will not.
Monday.
It's Monday by noon, so it wouldn't get to the paper until the 12th to be published on the 15th if we're waiting for council approval on the 5th. So then it would have to be 10 days after the 15th.
No. No, it's not 10 days after the
Oh,
notice.
7.
7 days after the notice.
Oh, well, the notice won't hit until the 15th is what you're saying.
Correct.
We
Unless
couldn't
you
get
did
it to the paper on the morning of the 6th to have it published on the 8th.
I would love to tell you yes, but it's a hard no.
That's fair enough. Okay, then maybe
We'll
the
have one
week of the
council meeting and-
26th.
With 2.
I mean, it just has to be calendar days. You could do it on the 23rd, Friday the 23rd.
Good.
If you wanted it the 8th, you would have to get it to the paper the 5th.
Yeah, and you could do that. Joe mentioned you could send it to the paper prior to council approval if,
Yes.
Because
It
then
wouldn't
you
be
can always
published.
bail out of the meeting.
because it's gonna be, by the time it hits the paper, it's gonna be already at council. But,
We could tell the paper to pull it Tuesday morning if.
yeah, you can do that too.
Or we could also have the meeting and say there's no action because it didn't get done by the board. So I think sending it out in advance is fine, right?
Is it possible to just have is it possible to set the date as being, let's say, 14 days or whatever that, number of days is after the council meeting, after they approve it? Such that if they approve it, because I'm just thinking if council for some reason doesn't approve it that day, then you'd have to reschedule. So I mean, are you able to just set a number of days, set the next meeting date as being a certain number of days after council approves this, or do you actually have to, no, yeah, Joe's saying you have to pick a hard date, all right?
Gotta have a hard date and time for the
Well,
public
why don't-
notice.
Why don't we look at, Lacey, are you comfortable submitting it Monday?
The 5th?
Yeah.
I'm not on the board. So if the board is comfortable with me sending it in, I can do that.
I'm comfortable, just knowing how the local paper works, I'm comfortable sending it in on Monday the 5th, assuming it's going to be approved by the city. And if it's not, we contact them Tuesday morning and tell them to pull it. And, that's where,
I mean, if it ends up running and they can't pull it for some reason, I've never had to ask them to pull anything.
Yeah.
We would just
we just
put that it
reschedule
was
anyway.
canceled.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else have any of the, Sharon and Jessica, you're good with that?
So we'd be looking at June 20th, Tuesday.
So that would let us meet on June 20th, yeah.
Could we make it 9 a.m. instead of 10 a.m.?
Does that work for everyone?
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Same setup as today?
All right. So Tuesday, June 20th, 9 a.m. in person or virtual, and yeah, we'll let you know if that needs to be modified based on the city councils.
One more
If
thing
we're getting
that
it in the 8th, wouldn't it be the week after, 7 days after the 8th?
You could.
Joe, I just wanted to ask, and not to complicate things again, but you said the statute, or you said that the required time is 7 days. Typically by statute, days that are set by statute are less than 10, typically don't include the weekends. I just want to make sure that we're on board there.
You're the attorney, Ward. We've always counted it as calendar days.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
Long as, I mean, I just haven't looked at that and I don't know, and I'm raising it now so that doesn't become a huge issue after we're all off the
Well,
meeting.
The 20th meets both,
Yeah.
whether it's calendar or business.
Okay.
If we tried to push it to the 15th, then that could be called a question.
All right, that's all I had.
All right. Does that, from a project standpoint, does that, those few days gonna make it?
No, because we're shooting for June 30th to submit to the city. So that'd be fine, right?
So that's still good time?
Yep.
Okay. All right, then, looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? Second. Sorry.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you, everyone.